The end never announces itself. It doesn't arrive with a flash, a warning, or a clean break. Collapse begins with small silences. The power grid that flickers once, the water pressure that thins, the convoy that doesn't return. And then there's no return at all. The post-collapse world isn't chaos, it's the absence of maintenance. Once the logistics spine fractures, the entire system dies by starvation. Not instantly, but mathematically. The illusion most people hold is that survival is an act of possession. The more you own, the safer you are. But collapse kills through physics, not poverty. Entropy doesn't care how many tools you stockpile. It only measures how many you can sustain. Every object you carry demands calories to move, attention to maintain, and energy to justify its presence. The equation becomes brutally simple. If a tool cannot multiply your survival potential across multiple domains, physical, biological, and psychological, it becomes dead weight. This is what's called the zero-margin reality. There's no buffer left, no resupply, no rescue. Every calorie, every motion, every decision becomes a transaction with death. In such a world, fantasy collapses under the weight of friction. What remains is logic, stripped, lean, and merciless. The old world was about comfort. The new one is about efficiency. The logic of ruin begins with accepting that civilization's infrastructure was your life support machine. Electricity regulated your temperature. Water systems sustained your hydration. Social order outsourced your defense. When all three vanish, you are left with the naked equation of survival: energy, water, security. The trinity that governs every organism since the dawn of biology. Lose any one of them, and you begin the countdown. Every survivor must become an engineer of his own entropy. The purpose is not to fight nature, but to negotiate with it through physics. The question shifts from "what do I have?" to "what sustains the most control per calorie?" The moment you understand that, the fantasy of endless gadgets dissolves. The real tools are few, but they are absolute. You stand in the ashes of infrastructure, and you must now build logic where there was once convenience. The weak will reach for collections, knives, tents, gadgets, thinking abundance means security. The strong will strip down to principles because simplicity is speed. And speed is survival. Collapse doesn't demand strength. It demands clarity. And clarity begins with the acknowledgement that most tools are illusions, weight pretending to be preparedness. In the end, there are only three that function in a true post-collapse world, and each one exists not because it's convenient, but because it obeys physics. Survival begins when consumerism dies. In the post-collapse environment, the myth of gear superiority is the first casualty. The shelves of the dead world are filled with objects engineered for comfort, not continuity. Brightly packaged promises of safety that melt under the friction of real entropy. The truth is this: tools do not exist to decorate survival. They exist to manipulate physics. If a tool doesn't alter the laws of energy, matter, or biology in your favor, it's nothing but ballast. The old mindset measured value by ownership. The new one measures by energy return on energy investment. EROEI, the law that governed every civilization long before it was forgotten. Firewood, oil, muscle. Each source was viable only as long as it produced more usable energy than it consumed. When collapse arrives, this law becomes absolute again. Every action is an energy transaction. Every calorie burned must generate a surplus. The tools that remain functional are those that multiply your energy, not merely extend it. This is the multiplier rule, the operating law of the true survivor. Every tool you keep must perform at least three essential functions across physical, biological, and psychological dimensions. A knife that cuts wood, dresses game, and enforces deterrence is a multiplier. A pot that boils water, stores calories, and signals presence is a multiplier. A lighter that creates fire, sterilizes instruments, and restores morale is a multiplier. Everything else is a liability. Complexity kills, redundancy wastes energy, specialization dies with supply chains. Survival is not about improvisation. It's about reduction, stripping existence down to the minimum number of controllable variables. The fewer parts you depend on, the fewer failures can occur. The more universal the tool, the longer it remains viable in changing conditions. That is the physics of continuity. Control through simplification. The average prepper makes a critical mistake, equating preparedness with accumulation. But the true post-collapse operator understands that every kilogram carried is a cost against mobility. And mobility equals life. When collapse turns static zones into kill zones, cities burning, roads blocked, contagion spreading, movement becomes your only defense. Your kit must obey thermodynamics, not fantasy. Biology reinforces this principle. The human organism runs on a closed loop of energy conversion. You burn calories to maintain temperature, hydrate cells, and process cognition. Each decision that wastes effort shortens your operational window. Tools that conserve energy directly extend life expectancy. That's not philosophy. That's math. And yet, the final layer is psychological. Tools serve not just the body, but the mind's fragile architecture. They impose control in chaos, giving form to the formless. A blade defines the edge between life and death. A container defines order within decay. A fire defines light against entropy. To lose them is to lose the illusion of dominion. And once that illusion dies, the will follows. So the core philosophy stands unchallenged. In collapse, tools are not accessories. They are the interfaces between man and physics, extensions of control that must earn their place through logic. The ones that survive the fall are not designed by marketing, but by entropy itself. The test is coming. Only 3 tools pass it. When civilization disintegrates, most tools die with it. The battery expires. The cartridge runs dry. The circuitry burns out under its own fragility. But 3 tools remain immune to decay because they are not inventions. They are continuations of physics. They existed before industry, and they will outlive it. Each one is a bridge between biology, thermodynamics, and psychology, and together they define the minimum viable human toolkit in a post-collapse world. The blade. The blade is not a weapon. It is a converter, the interface between matter and intent. In collapse, raw material becomes your new ecosystem. Bone, wood, metal, fiber, flesh. The blade turns them into order. It disassembles carcasses, reshapes debris into structure, and defends caloric sovereignty when negotiation fails. But its true power lies in precision, the conservation of effort. Every calorie saved from hacking, tearing, or breaking translates directly into extended lifespan. The blade is energy efficiency incarnate, one tool that replaces claws, teeth, and tools of labor. Its logic is elemental. Physics defines sharpness as the concentration of force over minimal surface area, a pressure multiplier. That's what survival demands: concentration. No wasted motion, no diffusion of effort. In the hands of the disciplined, the blade is not violence. It's geometry serving biology. It represents the human transition from prey to operator. And in darkness, when sound carries death, a silent blade is the last remaining expression of controlled intent. The container. Civilization began the moment humans learned to store. The vessel is the most underestimated invention in history, yet it is the foundation of every complex system. A container doesn't just hold water, it controls phase change, the ability to manage matter across solid, liquid, and vapor. That is thermodynamic dominance. Without containment, you cannot purify, preserve, or transport energy. You can't boil pathogens, ferment calories, or protect nutrients. The container is civilization condensed into one object. Biologically, it extends hydration range. Psychologically, it restores order. It defines the boundary between chaos and safety. The ability to pour, measure, and seal is the difference between survival and infection. In a world where decay is everywhere, containment becomes a ritual of resistance. A scavenged metal pot or plastic bottle is worth more than gold because it obeys the law of thermal control. It is the caloric multiplier of every survivor who understands that heat without containment is waste. The fire system. Fire is the oldest and final technology. It predates language, agriculture, and weaponry. It is the unbroken link between human will and environmental control. Post-collapse, it returns as the single uncorrupted source of civilization's power. Light, heat, sterilization, metallurgy, morale. Fire redefines time by extending the day, purifies water by killing the microscopic, and turns raw meat into digestible fuel. But its deeper function is psychological. It enforces territory. Light in darkness declares existence. Smoke signals presence. Flame attracts or repels, depending on how it's used. The fire system is more than spark. It's a doctrine, ignition, containment, and sustainment. It includes the knowledge of fuel hierarchy, oxygen control, and chemical reaction. It is chemistry translated into survival. In collapse, mastery of fire is mastery of continuity. A man who controls combustion controls entropy itself. Together, the blade, the container, and the fire system form a closed operational loop. The blade prepares the material. The container holds and purifies it, and the fire transforms it. That's the geometry of survival: cut, contain, burn. A complete circuit where energy is conserved, matter is recycled, and control is reasserted. Every other tool is a derivative of these three. The shovel is a blade that digs. The pot is a container that endures heat. The stove is a refined fire system. Civilization's collapse does not erase innovation. It simply removes redundancy. These three endure because they are axioms, not artifacts. If you lose them, you revert to biology. If you master them, you transcend decay. Every organism that endures collapse obeys geometry, the invisible architecture of survival. When you strip away myth, emotion, and culture, existence resolves into a triangle of forces: heat, containment, and transformation. These three axes define whether energy flows toward life or death. The blade, the container, and the fire system are not random artifacts. They are the three vertices of this geometry, the minimal framework that allows a human to resist entropy for one more day. Begin with heat. Thermodynamics dictates that life exists only within a narrow band of temperature and pressure. Below it, metabolism slows into hypothermic decay. Above it, proteins denature into ruin. Fire, therefore, is not luxury. It is biochemical regulation. In the post-collapse environment, where the climate becomes an adversary and shelter decays faster than flesh, the control of combustion becomes the act of civilization itself. Each spark is an act of defiance against entropy. Yet the untrained waste it, burning too much fuel, losing too much heat. turning survival into a spectacle instead of an equation. The operator knows better. Flame must be contained, reflected, and rationed. That brings us to containment, the second axis. The physics of containment govern the storage and transfer of potential energy. A vessel turns scarcity into continuity. It allows separation, clean from contaminated, liquid from solid, usable from lethal. In thermodynamic terms, it defines boundaries that slow entropy's advance. Water can be boiled, fuel can be carried, bacteria can be isolated. Without containment, there is no storage. Without storage, no planning. Without planning, no civilization. That is why, in every archaeological layer of human evolution, vessels mark the beginning of continuity. The post-collapse world will rediscover this lesson by force. And then there is transformation, the domain of the blade. Transformation is the manipulation of matter into utility. It is the human ability to reconfigure the environment to maintain equilibrium. The blade embodies mechanical advantage, the principle of focused force. Every cut is an act of transformation, every stroke a reduction of chaos into form. Biology itself operates on this same logic: the digestion of food, the processing of oxygen, the recycling of waste. The blade externalizes this biological process into the physical world. It is how humans extend their metabolism into matter. Together, these three, heat, containment, transformation, form what can be called survival geometry. They interlock like equations. Without containment, fire destroys. Without fire, containment stagnates. Without the blade, neither can be sustained. Each reinforces the other in a loop of control. In physics, this would be called a closed thermodynamic system. In survival, it is a doctrine. But beyond physics lies psychology, the silent fourth dimension of this geometry. Humans are meaning-dependent organisms. Without structure, the mind fractures faster than the body starves. The act of cutting, boiling and burning becomes ritual, an assertion of order in chaos. Fire gives light, which restores circadian rhythm. The container preserves water, which reduces panic. The blade crafts tools, which reaffirms agency. Together, they reconstruct the illusion of control, and sometimes illusion is survival. This is the hidden science beneath the myth of survivalism. Not brute endurance, but controlled energy conversion. A true operator does not fight nature. He synchronizes with it through disciplined manipulation of heat, containment, and transformation. Civilization may have given these acts names: cooking, forging, building. But beneath the words lies the same geometry that once pulled humanity from the void. In the ruins of the future, nothing will save you except what already saved your ancestors: the physics of control, repeated with precision. Master these three, and you are no longer reacting to collapse. You are shaping it. Philosophy doesn't keep you alive. Protocols do. In collapse, knowledge that isn't operational is just noise, and noise attracts death. The theory of survival geometry must convert into repeatable action, measurable outcomes, and behavioral rhythm. You don't think survival. You execute it, loop by loop, until it becomes identity. This is where logic turns kinetic. Every viable operator lives by a closed operational sequence known as the cut-contain-burn loop, the minimal cycle that sustains biological equilibrium in a resource-hostile environment. It is not a slogan. It is a metabolic algorithm. The moment the sun rises, the sequence begins. Cut. The blade acts first. It opens access to resources: wood for heat, plants for calories, carcasses for protein, debris for structure. Cutting is extraction, transforming inert matter into usable form. It's how potential becomes kinetic. The untrained hack mindlessly. The operator slices strategically, conserving motion and calories. Every cut must pay back more energy than it costs. One motion, three purposes: harvest, defend, construct, contain. Once material is extracted, it must be isolated and preserved. The container defines continuity: boil to purify, seal to store, cool to delay decay. In a post-collapse world, contamination is the most efficient killer. Pathogens travel faster than bullets. Water untreated equals infection. Food unsealed equals loss. The operator moves through the ruins with containment doctrine ingrained. Nothing unboiled enters the body. Nothing uncovered remains overnight. Nothing unsealed touches supply. Burn. Fire closes the loop. It sterilizes, transforms, and reinforces the mental perimeter. Fire is not just heat, it's command. It dries wet clothing before hypothermia sets in. It purges bacteria before digestion begins. It signals strength to allies and warning to scavengers. Each flame is both utility and deterrent, but the disciplined never burn without purpose. Fire consumes finite fuel. Use it only when it multiplies survival odds. Waste heat is wasted life. This loop repeats every day. You wake, you assess, you act. Cut, contain, burn. Again and again until it becomes instinct. Those who treat survival as improvisation die from energy bleed, chasing novelty, wasting calories, losing rhythm. The loop is control through routine, and routine is the antidote to panic. Each environment mutates the loop but never breaks it. In urban ruins, cutting means dismantling structures for materials. Containment means sealing potable water from contamination. Burning means controlled heat sources in confined air. In forest isolation, cutting becomes resource acquisition. Containment becomes preservation through natural insulation, and burning reverts to primal thermoregulation. In coastal collapse zones, the blade harvests protein from saltwater systems. The container desalinates or stores, and the fire evaporates, reclaiming purity from salt and decay. The principle adapts, the logic remains absolute. The unspoken fourth layer of this protocol is psychological control. When everything collapses, government, morality, time, routine becomes the replacement for order. Each repetition of the loop reinforces agency, the act of deciding, executing, and sustaining. You cannot command the world, but you can command the sequence, and that's enough. True operators don't worship their tools. They rehearse their logic. They don't panic when they lose equipment. They rebuild the loop from what remains. Because the loop is not a checklist. It's a doctrine of continuity, a discipline carved into reflex. In the end, the cut, contain, burn loop is not about survival. It's about sovereignty, the reclaiming of control from entropy, one motion at a time. When all systems fail, rhythm becomes power. And power in collapse is the only remaining currency. Every civilization that fell before you believed the same lie, that tools could substitute for understanding. The Romans built aqueducts, the Soviets built bunkers, the modern world built systems so complex that no one could see their own dependencies. Collapse exposes that blindness. When the lights go out, what's left isn't what you own. It's what you know. The blade dulls. The container cracks. The fire fades. Entropy always wins the long war. The illusion of permanence is the most lethal comfort of the old world. The survivors are not those who possess the most gear, but those who understand why the gear existed in the first place and how to rebuild it from nothing. Tools are extensions of logic, not replacements for it. This is the final shift every post-collapse mind must undergo. detachment from material security, and attachment to functional reasoning. Once you can rederive utility from physics and biology, you are no longer dependent on civilization. You become civilization's seed. You can craft a blade from stone, shape a container from clay, extract fire from friction. You don't carry survival, you regenerate it. That's the secret nobody tells you in the comfort era. Survival isn't an act of possession, it's an act of translation. The human brain is the first and final toolkit. All else is peripheral. The hands obey physics, the mind obeys logic. Lose the tool, and logic recreates it. Lose logic, and every tool becomes inert metal. In collapse, panic is the death of computation. Emotion consumes glucose faster than action, draining the system meant to calculate. The disciplined remain mathematical, reading environment as data, interpreting threat as variable, applying energy like currency. They don't hope. They run protocols. The post-collapse world is not a stage for bravery. It's a test of equations. Every time you act without logic, entropy gains ground. Every time you act with precision, the world obeys again, even if only for a moment. That moment is survival. The three tools, blade, container, fire, are physical metaphors for internal constants: clarity, structure, transformation. The true weapon isn't steel. It's the mind that forges meaning from chaos. Once you internalize that, collapse loses its power. You stop surviving reactively and begin existing deliberately. Remember this when the night closes in. The world doesn't care if you live. Physics doesn't negotiate. Biology doesn't forgive. But logic, cold, measured, ruthless logic, gives you one last chance to push back against the void. You were never meant to be saved by tools. You were meant to evolve into the one who understands why they work.